So, in the world of science, I know I always say so, but what other word can you use to introduce some ideas that unfortunately most people out there in the populace are not mentally advanced enough to understand? So is kind of like an apologetic word almost. It's like, well, so, I'm going to say this, but you're not going to understand it, and you're intellectually underdeveloped, and so I'm going to say this anyway, but you're not going to understand anything. So there you go. See, so in the world of science, any scientist will tell you nothing is impossible. In fact, science is basically the business of creating and innovating the impossible, or what people think is impossible, which isn't impossible. It's just not developed yet, right? It hasn't been brought to market. It hasn't been prototyped. It hasn't been patented. Doesn't mean it's not out there. It just means it hasn't been literally thrown into the faces of the unwashed masses. And by unwashed, I mean, uneducated. Most people these days are beyond intellectually inferior. They can't even put two and two together. They think that things that exist and have been out there for years don't exist, right? So for scientists, and I have a master's level equivalency in tumor biology and angiogenesis from Harvard Medical School, where I spent 14 years doing scientific research at the master's level. I joined Harvard Medical School in 1995, post-bachelor's level, in the lab of Dr. Harold Dvorak, who was an innovative, pioneering researcher in the field of angiogenesis, along with Judah Folkman. That's a lot of J sounds. Judah Folkman was also a pioneering researcher in the field of angiogenesis, and Dvorak and Folkman basically paralleled each other's research careers in discovering vascular endothelial growth factor, vascular permeability factor, which are protein factors found in the tumor blood vessels that are not found in healthy blood vessels. And so you can look at some of my co-authored published research studies from 1996, published in the European Journal of Cancer. In 2001 or 2000, I co-authored another study in the Journal of Laboratory Investigation, all under Hal Dvorak's, research leadership. So science is simply, again, thinking outside the box, considering the impossible, which is really not the impossible, it's just the unpublished or undiscovered or unpatented ideas that have been out there for a while, and bringing those to, again, the market, right? So there's stuff going on in this unit that just defies explanation. I have long known that there are surveillance devices being used in my bathroom by some very malignant sex offenders who have lived in this building almost as long as I have, but not quite. I moved in here in July of 2011. Things were pretty normal for the first couple of years, 2.5 years or so. Things were fine. There were no police reports. I didn't have to call 911 all the time. My things weren't getting stolen. My food wasn't getting contaminated. My washcloths weren't being smeared with foul-smelling body fluids that cause your skin to develop weird blisters when you use them, when you think, oh, this isn't, did I put this on here? Like, what's going on? And then you realize somebody's breaking into your place and contaminating your washcloths and your towels, hoping to give you some horrible skin infection. That didn't start happening until at least 2.5, 3 years after I had moved in and lived here pretty peacefully. And things just keep getting more and more insane, and I'm not the one who's causing the insanity. The insanity is being done to my living space by someone who is verifiably insane and who is being paid to be insane. And Mr. Oleg Alexeyev, the property manager, has been bragging to that exact fact for years. He has been sponsoring, according to several people who seem to know what's going on in this building, Mr. Alexeyev has been sponsoring a MIT-affiliated psychopath named Jasmine Irizarry, who also happens to be a malignant sex offender. I am assuming that Irizarry at some point was receiving some type of education at MIT, but because she's a psychotic sex offender and likes to use surveillance devices in people's bathrooms in very unusual places, I'm assuming somebody caught on to what she was doing at MIT, and then they just put her in the loony bin, which happens to be this building, unfortunately. It was a normal building when I moved in, but then 3 years after I moved in, towards the end of 2013, that's when the Greenville Group decided to start leasing multiple units in this building to the Department of Mental Health, and then placing some mentally disturbed pieces of psycho trash like Irizarry into the units right next to mine. I'm talking about the bathroom of 78 behind this wall. That's when things started getting a little weird in here. Personal hygiene items that I would throw out in my trash and properly dispose of would suddenly show up in the hallway in front of my door. That's a psychopath. That's also a sex offender, somebody who is literally perving and creeping all over your personal hygiene activities, what you do in the privacy of your bathroom. I don't know how many personal hygiene items that I have thrown out over the years have suddenly been placed in front of my door in the hallway by somebody who knows exactly what I do with my trash, where I put it, and exactly what I happen to put in my trash. And that means to go through my trash. That is a very mentally disturbed psychopath. And that's Jasmine Irizarry, the fat, ugly, perving, creeping, mentally disturbed sex offender piece of shit that also happens to be autistic. And I am at this point concluding she's an autistic savant, meaning she is technologically extremely savvy, probably innovative, but so mentally disturbed on all other levels that MIT basically just put her in the loony bin, which would be here. She was also at the Shattuck Hospital in 2006, in an inpatient capacity, and members of my PhD program in clinical psychology, because not only do I have a master's equivalency in scientific research, tumor biology, and angiogenesis, I also spent 5.5 years in a full-time PhD program in clinical developmental psychology while working part-time as a laboratory researcher at Harvard Medical School. You can do the two at the same time. Fucking reject retards who hate stalk my channel and don't understand anything that I say because they're mentally underdeveloped and are too stupid to understand most of how life works. And that's why they think everything and everyone is crazy, because when you're too stupid to understand how things work, everything seems crazy because, geez, how does this work? This is crazy. How does the wheels turn on a car? I don't know. That's just crazy, you know? Like, yeah, just read the comments on my channel. These pathetic retards have absolutely no brain cells. So back to Irizarry. She evidently is a psychopath, because I worked with her, members of her research team at the Shattuck Hospital in 2006 when I was doing a clinical internship there, and members of my PhD program were on the team that were treating Irizarry. So, you know, you have a psychopath on your hands who's also on the autism spectrum, but seems to be quite talented at technology. So things keep disappearing from this unit, and they're disappearing in more and more weird ways that don't make sense. So I've been locking my door at night, putting the chain across the door, and actually taping the chain, because I found out on YouTube that you can actually open the chain that is placed across a door from the inside. You can open it from the outside simply by using a piece of floss to catch the chain, and you pull the floss across the chain, and then that pulls the chain off of its rail, and you can open the door. But somebody keeps getting in here and things keep getting stolen. Things that I need in order to prevent this malignant sex offender named Irizarry to see what I do in my bathroom. She has a sick and twisted, obsessive need to watch other women use the bathroom. I'm assuming she doesn't do this to guys. I've been told by the Boston Police Department that Irizarry targets other females and has issues with other females. That's very evident. She refuses to leave me alone. And over the last, 12 years now, almost 12 years, she has regularly and repeatedly managed to get in here and contaminate my cosmetics, my personal care items. She's psychotically jealous of other women, literally tries to eliminate other women from her radar. You know, like, she's literally a psychotic attack dog towards other women. She's got rabies towards other women. So she keeps contaminating my shampoos and conditioners. And literally, if I don't tie them up in bags and put the bags up near the ceiling, whatever I don't tie up in bags and put up near the ceiling, she manages to get into and contaminate. So you're pulling out like a brand new bottle of conditioner that you've never used before. You open it up and it smells absolutely disgusting. And you know somebody has put something really nasty in there that should never be in a bottle of conditioner, that kind of thing. So I have been using large size newspapers to cover the area around my toilet, because not only do I know that there are surveillance devices in my bathroom, back to my original idea here, but people keep telling me that they get to see what I do in my bathroom. I don't know how many dozen residents of this building and people associated with this building, and even people who I happen to work with, have told me since 2015 that they get to see what I do in my bathroom. And they were even making nasty comments about the washcloths I was leaving on the floor, et cetera, et cetera. And this is way before I ever had a YouTube channel. So not only are there surveillance devices in my bathroom, I found one on the wall across from my toilet back in 2017 when my vision was perfect. This little tiny black dot that looked like a paint splatter, but was so perfectly even and round that I realized, wait, that's not a paint splatter. And if it's a paint splatter, why are there no other paint splatters around it? It was the only one. And then I looked at it closely and it looked like I had a little eye in it, like a lens. And I was like, wait a second, that's not what I think it is. Nah, that's not possible. So I left it there for a while. Then I realized, no, that damn thing is still there and it's not coming off. Like paint splatters, you can just peel them off the wall, right? Especially if you have a semi-gloss paint on your wall, on your bathroom wall. This thing would not come off. So I mentioned it to the Greenville group, mentioned it to maintenance. They came up here and they took it away. I never saw it again. But that doesn't mean that there aren't other devices like it in and around my bathroom. And I suspect that Irizarry is putting them on the inside of the toilet. Nothing is impossible when it comes to science. And most pieces of technology that people are just discovering these days have been out there for years. People don't realize that cell phones were actually being used in the 1940s by basically like telephone repair trucks who were driving from one telephone repair station to another and were communicating with other telephone repair trucks from the telephone company on cell phones, not CBs, but actual cell phones. They also had cell phones in the 1970s in cars. Just watch Charlie's Angels. But most people didn't even know about that technology until the late 80s when cell phones came out in a different format. So yes, it is possible to have surveillance devices that are really tiny, like the head of a Sharpie pen, and that they can be waterproof and stuck to ceramic surfaces. They can also be stuck on dishes and on silverware, and they are so small, unless your eyes are really, really good, you're probably not going to see them. They're also not black. These are devices that are made to blend in with the environment, so I suspect that they might be clear. Yeah. And because I am a scientific researcher with a dozen scientific studies co-authored under my name, I am quite good at taking both empirical data and my gut feelings and my personal observations and kind of mixing them together, and then using the scientific method to eliminate possibilities that just don't make sense. Right now, I'm suspecting that there are surveillance devices, not just around my toilet, but inside the toilet. So to make a long story short, I've been using newspapers to cover the inside of the toilet, and the newspapers literally get soggy, and then you could just flush them down the toilet. They're not really that hard to flush. I mean, newspapers get soft really fast. So the newspapers that I had, I was sticking between my mattresses right here. I had a pile of newspapers between these two mattresses at the end of the bed. They're gone. I've been out all day today. There was some newspapers between the two mattresses this morning. Now they're gone. There were at least like 3 folded newspapers between the mattresses. I've literally lifted up my entire mattress and there are no newspapers. They are gone. And I am not the one who moved them anywhere. I didn't put them anywhere else because there's nowhere else to really hide newspapers. I don't want to leave them out in the open because then Irizarry could get in here, and start contaminating the surface of the newspapers. And the next thing you know, I have some weird rash on my ass. So I hide the newspapers so that they don't get smeared with some kind of contaminated body fluid from Irizarry, the perving, creeping sex offender, virally contaminated psychopath. When I was doing my clinical internship at the Shattuck Hospital, members of Irizarry's therapy team had to gown up around her because she was positive for a deadly virus that is transmitted through body fluids, and she would try to kill the staff by vomiting on them. Okay, I can say that because she's clinically insane, and she's also carrying a very deadly virus that if it gets into your body, you can die from it. Okay, so this is a public health announcement. When criminals engage in criminal activities that are constituting attempted murder, then you have the right to tell everybody about what they're doing because other people could be at risk besides yourself. So I'm going to say this. Jasmine Irizarry is a mentally disturbed psychopath, a registered sex offender who was in the Massachusetts Sex Offender Registry in 2016, maybe 2017, but apparently Massachusetts has now eliminated autism spectrum sex offenders from their registry. I don't know. Like, let's just let all the autistic psychos go out there and molest children and rape women because they're autistic. Let's just let them do whatever they want. Well, you know, Massachusetts is a blue state. Blue states have a lot of really, really stupid, harmful ideas towards law-abiding, innocent citizens and blue states favor criminals and psychos and sex offenders. And let's just let them all run around and do whatever the hell they want. And if they show up at your front door, well, fuck you. Too bad for you. So I suspect Irizarry is getting in here somehow and stealing the newspapers from between my mattresses where I hide them, which supports two theories. The fact that she's constantly stealing newspapers, I mean, that's not the first time the newspapers have disappeared from between the mattresses. I use those newspapers to cover my toilet. If there was nothing in the toilet that needed to be covered, Irizarry wouldn't be constantly foaming at the mouth trying to get in here and stealing the newspapers. B, there are also surveillance devices around my bed. Otherwise, Irizarry would have no idea that I'm storing the newspapers that I used to cover my toilet between my mattress and the box spring. So I've just basically cemented my hypothesis by observing that a pile of newspapers that I've been storing between the mattress and the box spring on this bed for a couple of weeks now has disappeared for what is now the third time. The first few times that they disappeared, I was like, oh, that's weird. Well, maybe they fell under the bed, or maybe I put them somewhere else. So, you know, you wait a few days and you wait for the missing items to turn up. And when they don't turn up and they're not elsewhere under the bed or they're not in another bag, you realize somebody got in here and stole them. And that just happened today. So today is now very early Thursday morning, March 13th, maybe 1:30, 2 a.m. I was out all day today. When I left, I still had some newspapers stuck between the mattress and the box spring, nicely hidden. And if nobody knows what I do in here, and if there are no surveillance devices, then those newspapers would still be between the mattress and the box spring in the spot where I put them. They're nowhere. I just lifted up the entire mattress. There are no newspapers anywhere around here. They're not under the bed either. I moved the bed. They're gone. And I need them. So I had to improvise and start cutting up paper shopping bags to cover the inside of the toilet. Because again, if there's nothing on the inside of the toilet that Irizarry would not want to have covered up, because she's an obsessive sex offender who pervs and creeps all over what other women do in their bathrooms because she's mentally disturbed and jealous of other women, then she would not be taking the materials that I use to cover the inside of the toilet. She wouldn't care if I was covering the inside of the toilet or not, because there wouldn't be anything to cover on the inside of the toilet, right? I rest my case.